call it to order this meeting of the Finance Committee. Present, we have committee members Kate West, Bob Cotton, Brenda Hastings. Also present is board member Gina Cannon, Superintendent Kathleen Murphy, and Business Administrator Jack Dunn. And Superintendent Murphy, are you going to introduce?
Well, I'm going to pass the baton very quickly to our business administrator, who's really put this presentation together and all of our business items tonight. So.
Okay.
All right, Jack.
All right, so the copy of both these presentations are in your folder, in your committee finance folder. We went through who is here and the members on this committee. For tonight, I'm just going to give you a quick status of the audit, which is only a couple slides. Then I'm going to give you the status of our healthcare plan. I have Kirsti Karpawich from Borislow, who has been our consultants for 10 years and is now also the City of Concord's consultant as well, as it relates to health benefits and other benefits. And then we'll go into some proposed changes for FY23 as it relates to some of the revenue that we've received and some changes we're going to ask be made to the budget. So with that, I will go right into the status of the audit. As you remember, I presented to you this slide on 9/12, in particularly the third line from the bottom that says Special Education Expendable Trust Fund. We had originally planned not to add 383,671.25. The unassigned fund balance was actually 2.1, not 2.4 million. I should have picked that up, but it was glaringly obvious that after this meeting, because the system automatically syncs, and in the reports I give you, it says 2.1 million. So we did not need the 300,000, so we transferred that to the Special Education Trust Fund. So now you see we moved 83,000, not 383, okay, over into the fund. And as
Into the fund or because it says transfer?
yeah, I'm sorry, we only pulled
trust.
83 out, not 383 out, okay?
So why does it say transfer from trust? Isn't it transferred into trust?
Well, what happened was we move it over and it's an up to, and we had to bring it back.
Okay.
And this is on the drive?
Yeah. So that is done to be able to match
So we transferred 383 into the trust fund total for this, at the end of the last fiscal year.
I'll give you what the grand total is. I'll look and I'll.
Okay,
I'll
I'm
look
just,
at that. Yep.
I'm having the same following transfer in, transfer out, so.
Yep. I'll do that while we're doing
Okay.
the other thing and give you the total. So, but either way, we're at the 2.1. So far, the audit they've matched our number, and we are where we are for this and for food service. Let me see what else I have. Yeah. So this is what I presented to you on 9/12, that came to the 2.4 million, and then now it's 2.1 because the actuals have changed. So if I toggle between them, you'll see. Hold on a second. Make sure the revenue had changed. See the 593 that was presented, 90,593,688.19.
Mm-hmm.
It's 90,293,688.19. Because the transfer in was not as high as we needed it to be. Or was more than what we wanted it to be.
And where did it go back to?
Special education.
The trust fund.
Yeah.
It's back in the trust fund,
Yeah.
rather than the actual.
Rather than the
Okay.
general fund budget to support it.
Okay.
So, okay. And that was all part of the moves we did last October with that extra money that we got, that one-shot money. So, okay. And I'll load up the revenue and expense report and show what that final number was that got moved over. And then the food service fund, that is the number they're saying is extra. As I mentioned to you, that regulation. They also have a number of new people over there. I have spoken with the individual who is going to be sending the email out on how we have to manage that money. I'm hoping to have that for the 26th and then make proposals to you on how we want to start spending that down. What they've told me verbally on, what was it, Friday, was that they will ask us to create a spend down plan to spend the money. We are not the only district that is in this position to have extra funds, because if you remember, because all the meals were free, we were serving a lot of meals. That has dropped considerably, and I will show you those numbers on the 26th. We're nowhere near where we were. So part of that spend down plan, we'll be looking to buy equipment, because we've had a number of equipment pieces fail, and that's a good way to go after it. That is a qualified expense, she had told me. And then the only thing I've asked is, can you go longer than 1 year? Because I hate to blow this money all in 1 year. We'd like to phase it, but they have to give more guidance.
And you're saying you're going to bring a plan to the full board on the 26th?
Okay.
And really, all I want to be able to make sure I do is encumber it. You want to have it and debated in committee, that's fine. I don't want to, I want to make sure that the board was aware of the amount, and that I have minutes, and that everything is good with what they're telling me I need to make sure I have in place. Because this is the time we touch the budget, so. I just don't have any direction besides verbal. right
From
now.
them?
Right.
So this is the 22 audit, is what you're saying?
Yeah, for the food service fund, the amount, they're matching the same number we have
So this is also available on the website, right?
in your folder, yeah.
But I mean, it's also available for the public on the website?
Well, this will get posted when we're done with this, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I work on this up until the meeting, and then we'll post it, so. Okay? So that was mine.
So just going back
Yep.
a little bit, what's the timing on when the audit will be completed, do you think?
I figure by December at the latest.
Right. And maybe it's not entirely related, but Superintendent, maybe you could tell me, or Jack, either one, what is our experience so far with people signing up for meals now that the state has not bothered to apply for free meals?
Well, I think we're about 1,400 and some, which is within a tolerance of about 150 of where we're at. But the utilization is way down. The meal counts are way down.
1,400 and some what?
Free and, that sign
Free
up
and
for free and
reduced,
reduced.
okay.
Yeah, the applications that are, kids that are approved,
Okay.
yeah.
Were you asking that, or how many meals in total we were?
Both, actually.
We'll give you, on the 26th, I'm gonna bring you the meal count comparisons.
Okay.
We put a new system in this year, and they're getting me that out, and I wanted to pull the old, I wanted you to see 2 years worth of meals when we were free versus now we're not.
Right.
And give you pre-COVID meal counts as well. Try to go back 5 years, so,
Yeah,
okay?
I'd appreciate that, that'd be good.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right. All right, I am gonna turn this now, oh, I think that's just an extra slide, am I right? Yep, no, that we talked about from the last time. What did I do with my slide? Either way, I'm gonna turn this over to Kirsti now. You have it, a printout in front of you, and I will put her presentation on the, screen, because that feeds in the cameras as well, okay?
Okay, thank you, Jack.
You're welcome. The next one.
You wanna, okay, you're gonna do the,
Yeah, I can do that.
Alright.
No, actually, I'll let you do it.
Oh, it's-
I know that can get confusing
Okay.
between.
so I'm Kirsti Karpawich. I am an employee benefits consultant, as Jack said, and I work with the district and lots of municipalities and school districts in the state. Worked with Concord for a while. And so, I was talking to Jack, and he was commenting on kind of the state of the state in this industry, and I said, I'm happy to come in and talk to you, because we're getting asked about once a week, are we the only ones? Like, I'll be in meetings, and the CFO will be like, are we the only one? I'm like, you're not the only one. Like, we're seeing macro trends that are impacting medical claims and pharmacy claims across the board. And so I guess I just thought it might be helpful to kind of set the stage so that you can see some of what's influencing or what will influence your renewal and all the other schools in the state as well. So some of the new things, like COVID was definitely an accelerator. Like when you were just talking about the meals, we saw the same thing. Like in claims, like dental claims, nobody went to the dentist, right? So then all of a sudden there was like all this premium coming in, and you were self-funded, so you save money. But similar dynamics across industries, I guess I'll say. But some of the things that have come out of COVID are, one, attracting and retaining staff, like that's across the board challenging. Telemedicine, so whether it's like your regular physician or behavioral health visits now online, that's going to be here to stay. And prescription drug costs are one of the biggest accelerators for the increase in the cost of health benefits overall, especially specialty medicines. It's not uncommon now to have a large claim that'll be $350,000 a year that's all RX, and we never used to see that. It used to be if you had a large claim, it would be an inpatient claim, right? But now it'll be managed by a prescription drug. And the new thing that's coming down the pike is gene therapy, and that can be in the millions. So there's the positive is that a lot of these drugs are treating conditions that didn't used to be able to be treated, or people would have a terminal illness and now they'll have quite a good lifestyle for multiple years. But the negative side is that obviously it comes with a huge cost. So we're all grappling with that. Virtual open enrollment, healthcare literacy. So one of the things that you're going to hear a lot about is this whole like transparency. There's a new transparency law. In New Hampshire, there's wide discrepancy in cost depending on where you go. So the highest MRI cost is Memorial Hospital. It's over $10,000. That's up in Conway. Same MRI at Dairy Medical can be like $750. That's more than tenfold a difference for the same procedure. So where you go matters. Ambulatory surgical centers cost less than hospitals, etc. So there'll be a lot more talk about that kind of transparency. And then the other macro trend we're seeing is leave management. You might be hearing about this new New Hampshire paid family medical leave law. So just like lots of employers wrestling with how to handle all of the different leaves. So those are some of the macro trends. And one of the things, so when we talk about medical trend, the concept of medical trend is if you have a procedure today, what will that procedure cost in a year? It's like medical inflation. And right now we see that range, it's really hovering at 8 and even pushing above 8%. The slide that you're seeing here are PricewaterhouseCoopers costs, and they were this was published at the beginning of the year, and honestly, I think that what we're seeing are even higher trends than what they were saying. The 6.5 to 8 seems low for New Hampshire, but at least that. And the dental trend forever was 3%, and we're seeing this post-COVID surge of a lot of times 5 or 6% claims in dental because of the pent-up demand. So claims are running pretty high right now. And then from the prescription drug side, it's that specialty drugs and the biologics that are significantly, yeah.
Isn't this projected to decrease though, because this is kind of like people weren't going to the doctor for a while and then they go all at once kind of, and then that's going to dissipate, or is that not?
So there's a little bit of that. There's also the people that didn't go to the doctor to get a mammogram or a colonoscopy, and so things are further down the pike than they were.
Right.
I think that maybe some of what you're talking about would be like orthopedic things, like maybe there was a hip or a knee and they waited and then they had them and then it wouldn't be pent up. But we're also seeing, like you hear about the travel nurses and the incredible rising cost of paying for like staff at hospitals, and so medical inflation obviously is impacted by that. And then just the pharmaceutical costs are really through the roof. They're not as regulated as they could be. There's a ton of innovation, and the spending is right now there aren't very many caps on it. So we're just seeing $1 million claims at a much higher frequency than we ever have in the past. We're also seeing a lot of transplants. We're seeing a lot of cirrhosis of the liver after COVID. We're seeing mental health claims through the roof. I mean, I had one carrier tell me that their mental health claims were up 62%. Like, there's just so many compounding factors that are driving costs after COVID. So, that might be one thing, but then there's like 7 other things that are also impacting it. And right now, we're not seeing as many inpatient COVID claims, but we're seeing the impact of the long haul claims. So on the specialty drug side of things, this is going to be an area that we're just going to continue to hear more and more about. The new thing on the horizon is gene therapy, and if you, it's going to be coming within the next year or two, and those drugs will cost between $1 and $5 million a year for somebody to receive one of those, and so obviously that's an enormous price to bear. If you're an employer or if you're self-insured, it's going to be super expensive. But we're seeing in your claims and then across the board throughout any claim pick that we look at in the state, a huge rise in specialty drugs. 40% of the new drugs that are launched by manufacturers are now specialty. So they're really contributing to the price inflation of medical claims.
And I don't know if you can answer this or Jack, but can you talk a little bit about what is in our current plan on controlling, what are our requirements around step therapy or biologic similars or generics? And
so, school care definitely has in place through Cigna, and then, through consultants. They use a number of consultants. Step therapy, case management, like a lot of controls in order to try to make sure that if people receive a drug that it's medically necessary, that they've gone through kind of the proven steps so that everybody just can't get anything. There certainly is like incentive to do mail order RX. There's incentive to go to generic drugs. Right now, within the next 2 to 4 weeks, a whole utilization package of your specific claims is going to be released by school care, and so we would be able to come back and look at your claims if we wanted. But tonight we were just really going to look at industry claims because they aren't available quite yet for the district, but they are coming.
That's usually about a 25-page report that we get, and we review it with them.
Totally different topic maybe, but I've been reading an awful lot lately about mental health claims, anxiety claims, those kind of things. How do you see that impacting, if at all, what the school district's going to have to be dealing with?
I think that it impacts what any single employer or school or entity that offers insurance is going to be impacted by that. I mean, we're seeing, so on one hand, we're seeing a lot more telephonic behavioral health claims than we ever have before, so that's good, but we're also seeing a lot more inpatient mental health claims, and mental health claims as a percentage of overall claims has grown significantly. I literally had one carrier tell me that their mental health claims were up 62%. Like it's significant. So anxiety, depressive disorders, substance abuse, we're seeing a huge influx of those post-COVID. And I also see transplants and cirrhosis of the liver, way more than we ever used to as a result of, coming out of the pandemic. I think on the positive, we have a shortage of providers, as we all know, and so it's challenging for people to find behavioral health providers in New Hampshire.
Yeah,
and I think that's
our
why
community doesn't have access to adequate mental health care.
What's that?
I said our community doesn't have
correct.
access.
Yeah,
to
I also
adequate
work
mental
with
health care.
Riverbend.
Yeah.
So I'm very familiar with that. I work with a lot of the mental health agencies in the state. There's definitely a shortage of providers, which I think is why trying to have telephonic counseling is trying to fill the gap, but I know it doesn't 100% fill the gap. So the answer is we're definitely going to see that as part and parcel of what's driving the claims, for sure. So this is a slide by Sun Life, and Sun Life is what's called a stop-loss carrier, and a stop-loss carrier is a reinsurer for big claims, okay? So what they do is they're one of the largest stop-loss carriers in the United States, so they put out a report every year that just analyzes the claims that they're seeing coming through. And you can just see here 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, the number of claims that came through their book of business that were 1 million, that were 2 million, that were over 3 million, just like a continual escalation of multi-million dollar claims. And what happened was when the Affordable Care Act was passed in 2010, there used to be a cap. You couldn't have a medical claim that was more than $1 million, and that ceiling was removed. And so now, I mean, I personally have dealt with the claims this year in New Hampshire that were over single claims that were 1.7 million. So it happens. It doesn't happen every year, but if you're if you're a school of your size, occasionally something will come through. Usually it's a preemie baby, or maybe it's a transplant, or maybe those type of things.
And to be clear, the cap wasn't on what we would, like what the insurance company would charge. It would be on what we could, what a patient could get covered. So.
Yeah, I mean, your claims wouldn't have hit. You wouldn't have been hit with a claim that was over.
No, we wouldn't have been hit,
Yeah.
but that doesn't mean the people we're covering wouldn't have been hit with a claim that might have been higher than the cap.
It wouldn't.
It wouldn't have hit our books, but
No,
it might have
not
hit
a-
theirs or their ability to access care.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. But now it could. I mean, you're in a pool and you have a ceiling over which claims are ceded to a reinsurer through school care. So it's not like you personally are going to pay them, but obviously how the pool does impacts how you do, and so
That's what we pay later.
it impacts the whole.
Oh, welcome to the concept of reinsurance.
Right? Yeah. And then there's a lot of new injectable drugs, and so you'll hear where these drugs are administered can impact the cost. So sometimes, like infusion therapy is definitely something that's much more prevalent than it used to be, and sometimes they're delivered in a hospital setting. Sometimes there's a push to deliver them in a home setting because there's usually a facility charge in addition to the cost of the prescription drug. But there are definitely a lot more injectable drugs than there used to be, treating things like certain cancers, certain like immunosuppressant disorders, type things like that, muscular dystrophy sometimes, so significant conditions, but we're seeing them throughout the book. And you can see here, look at all the top ones these are all cancer, and then immunodeficiency, blood disorder, a lot of cancers.
Some of them are advertised every night on TV.
Oh, I know. You can always see the ones that you see on TV on these lists, 100%. I mean, and then there's all of the psoriatic arthritis drugs. We see those throughout all of our claims. So the Humira, Enbrel, things like that. Those are really common. And in New Hampshire, we see a lot of multiple sclerosis claims. So the way that your renewal is developed is school care will look at the claims for the prior year, and there's something called a loss ratio, and a loss ratio is you take all the claims for the year, so your claim pick, and then you divide it into the premium, so what you paid school care for the claims. And the target loss ratio that they would like to see you at is 92%. And what that means is that for every dollar, 92 cents would be claims, and 8% would be admin to pay Cigna to administer the claims, to et cetera, have school care there. And that's good. The higher that target loss ratio, the better for you. So we often see if you were not an SAU in a pool like school care, if you were say you were a manufacturer with the same head count, that would be 85%. So normally that's what we see is like 85% and 15% margin. But it's nice, like when you work with a municipality or an SAU, a lot of times they'll underwrite you to a higher loss ratio so that there's less admin for them, more dollars going to claims. That said, in the past year, for every dollar you paid school care, they paid $1.04 in claims because your loss ratio was 104%. So for every dollar that you paid school care and they paid Cigna paid $1.04 in claims. Okay, so you ran over because it was a significantly high claim year. So there's a pooling level, so it's $150,000. And so what happens is, say you had $1 million claim, only $150,000 of that would be factored into your renewal, and everything else would be seeded, it would be pooled out. It's not necessarily seeded to a reinsurer like if you were directly self-insured, but school care pools it out of your renewal. Last year, your loss ratio was 96.67%, and this year it was 104. So we've been seeing it, and I'll go over this in a little bit, but steadily creep up kind of year to year to year. It feels like it's been just gradually moving up, and this is the highest year for a while. So you had 8 large claimants that were over 150,000 that totaled $2.5 million. One of them's termed. Versus the prior year, there were 7 large claimants and they totaled 1.7 million.
One of which is termed.
When you say termed, what do you mean?
So that means that they're no longer on the plan. So these are the large claims are de-identified.
Okay.
They're all in the yellow plan. So you can see the varying dollar amounts. And then, so termed means they're no longer on the plans. That means they either left the district or they passed away. Those are really the 2 reasons why somebody would terminate. We don't know. They, purposely don't share great detail about the high cost claimants.
Is it possible that they also go to the 65 plus plan?
Or they could retire. Yeah. So they've either they could retire.
Jack, can you just remind which is the plan that people are going into now? Green, red, yellow.
The orange plan is the HSA plan, and we have 5 groups within our unaffiliated that we offered that to.
Okay, orange isn't on here.
There's not enough to be materially.
No, so I'm just of the ones where we're looking at the loss ratio. Green. Which one is the one where we're
yellow?
Yellow is the one.
Majority.
So here we go. Green, red, yellow.
Thank you.
So, I don't have the head counts on here, but that green is probably
those are the grandfather.
A handful.
Plans, right?
I mean, we're talking a handful. Yeah.
That's the HMO plan.
The majority of the people are on the yellow, like the vast majority. Yeah. So that's why all the high cost claimants are on the yellow. The orange wouldn't have been in the past year enough to make this report.
So, Kirsti, the green are those that are the early retirees.
Yeah.
There's nobody active
That's
that's
right.
on it. So
That's
there
right.
are people that are 55 to 65. We're not 65 yet, that we pay a portion of their health through whatever's been bargained, but they're within that pool. Once they turn 65, they get kicked to the 65 plus plan.
And I will say a positive about being with school care, and that's that school care was really forward thinking, and when they developed plans about a decade ago and moved everybody to this yellow plan, that was pretty radical for a school district. And it's a consumer-driven plan with a health reimbursement account built in, which means that people have exposure. They have more exposure to how much things cost than just if it's like a $5 copay or $10 copay. And the reason that's important is because what I was talking about at the beginning, where there's this wide discrepancy in cost. And so the thinking is that if people can see what things cost, then they may be more apt to be a healthcare consumer. So it has actually, this yellow plan has done a very good job of suppressing claims relative to traditional HMOs. So we've definitely seen it contain costs over time. But you happen to have a lot of high cost claimants right now, which isn't, like this happens, like there are years when there's a lot of high cost claimants, and it really doesn't matter how much wellness you do or what kind of plan you're on, like you have high cost claimants. It's going to drive your overall loss ratio. Hopefully some will resolve. But I do feel like you're in I'm thankful that you're in the pool that you're in for overall cost containment relative to the options. Yeah.
So is the increase over the 96%, is that utilization or is that?
Those are these high cost claimants. So
right.
Yeah.
But is that utilization or is it cost of service?
Cost of service.
Okay.
It'd be more like 1 or 2 shock claims versus like hundreds of people doing something more.
Right, so I'm trying to look at, like, for example,
Aggregate.
lots of people may be asking for mental health care that
Yep.
they didn't before.
Yep.
That would be a utilization driven.
Right, yep.
Whereas the high claimants would be a,
I think when we get the detailed report, we're gonna see both, because because you're running, because we've seen a consistent creep up over time, which that would tend to be more utilization over time, but I do think that we're also gonna see, we're gonna see both, because we're gonna see these big spike, high-cost claimants. But I would agree with you that we're gonna see areas where there's more utilization than there has been in the past, and I wouldn't be shocked if, I haven't seen it, so I literally am speaking from, I don't know what it is, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's mental health, because that's what we're seeing across the board. But that is not a comment on your claims.
no,
'cause I haven't
I'm
seen
just
them.
trying to figure out what's driving
yeah,
it. Is
yeah.
it, you know, is
Yeah.
it that everybody's, to see the doctor costs more? Or is it that more people are seeing them?
Yes
You know
and
what I-
yes.
Okay. Thank
Yes,
you.
yes to all of the above, yeah.
I apologize. I'm just trying to figure out how the overall loss ratio works, because
Yeah.
is it just that it's double what we projected to spend? Is that what's
Double?
or I'm trying to figure out.
Why is it over 100%?
Yeah, I just don't understand.
Okay, so the loss ratio is kind of a factor of where your rates were set the prior year versus how your claims came in, okay? And so when school care sets your rate, like tomorrow is the rate setting meeting, and then on November 1st, rates will be announced, right? So they're about to set rates. Well, when they work with actuaries, they try to look at your claims and peg a good, they want
Right, that's why I'm saying when it says 104%, I would
Right.
assume that would be 100% would be you spent 100% of more than what you had.
No, you spent, so if your target was 92 and you're at 104, you're like, what, 12% more?
See, that's what I didn't
than you-
understand. I thought it was.
12%. Yeah, it's like 12 points higher than our target.
That's
12 points.
I just didn't understand how it works. Overall loss ratio is 104%,
So,
and
right.
then these different plans at 106.
Okay, yep, so that's the bottom of this massive spreadsheet that's totaling up for the year. So everybody on the green plan, which is not very many people, had 106% loss ratio, and the rest of your population ended up with the 104. So net, it's 104, meaning,
So does it mean if we paid $100 in premiums, it cost them 106 to care for
104.
our,
104. And that doesn't
if you
take
paid
into-
$1 million,
Yeah.
right, yeah,
Yeah.
whatever, you do the math on whatever, yes, it costs that much more than what you paid. the
Wait,
basic
one more
plan.
time. I'm sorry.
so let's say we paid $100 in premiums. It cost them $4 more to provide care. It cost them $104 to provide
Cigna,
care.
yeah.
When they were expecting to pay
92 cents.
$92.
Yeah, do it on $1. So you gave Cigna $1, they paid $1 for in claims.
So
What
it is
was
always
supposed-
in comparison to that 96.
That was last year,
Or
so
to
that
this,
was last year.
92 is what the goal is 92 up at the top.
Okay.
Because
So,
there's
like, right.
8% for
So-
administration.
So they lost money on us this
Correct.
year, so they are going to adjust our rates for the future so they don't
Be
lose
higher.
money on us next year and they make a profit.
I've just never seen this kind of information presented like this before, so I just.
you're trying to figure it out. No, that makes sense. So, they thought that you were gonna give them $1, and they were gonna spend 92 cents of every dollar on claims and keep 8 cents for admin. But you gave them $1, and they spent $1.04 in claims that last year.
So our rates are going
Right.
up.
So essentially, we
That's
paid
all.
into a plan and then we underpaid for the insurance plan based on what the claimants used.
Correct.
Okay.
Right.
But it's just the 104% doesn't make sense to me, and it's because I'm thinking of it as of a whole. And so
Yeah, yep, and the loss ratio it's just a standard like industry metric to try to figure out how someone's running. So if I if I open stuff up and I look at the loss ratio, I have a sense if it's running at 60%, you're running really well and you're lining the pockets of the insurance company. You don't want to be running at 60%. You paid them too much, right? You would have paid $1 in premium, $1 in premium and only 60 cents on claims. You don't want that. You want it to be close.
I need to watch more Shark Tank. That's what this is about.
But if I look at it and I see 104, I'm like, oh boy, because that's too much. Like you didn't pay enough premium. They paid too much in claims, which then leads us to think what's going to happen next year. So that's kind of, that's that. So we have the high cost claimants. Okay, so this is a little bit of an eye chart, but I do this for Jack every year to try to, and you'll see like we do it over time, like the next one is it over time. So we do this year after year after year. And what we try to do is just keep track of, okay, at the time of renewal, what was the medical trend in the state? What was the trend at school care? What was the trend at Cigna? That all means what's medical inflation running for all those entities. And then how did you end up? Were you running above or below the school care trend that year? What did your plan renew at? Okay, and then what was the premium holiday? So if we walk through the right-hand column last year, okay, so the trend in New Hampshire was 8 to 10%. It's been that forever. There used to be what's called a COVID factor, so there was actually a load that they would put in the rates because they didn't know what was going to happen. There was a lot of volatility. They weren't sure whether there was pent-up demand, there were going to be tons of surgeries, were there going to be tons of COVID cases. So there were COVID factors that were added to rates last year. Those are gone now. So school care's trend last year, the pool, it ran at about 6.4%. Okay, that was their medical trend, so less than the state trend. Less than Cigna. Cigna's trend last year ran at 8. The medical was 7.9, the RX was 8.4. And school care, their book tends to run historically a little bit lower than Cigna, and a lot of that, like I was saying, was due to that yellow plan, and they've been able to have consumerism in the block, and it's been a very healthy pool. And last year, you were running slightly above trend, and you can see the school care trend last year was 6.4, and your renewal came in at 6.5. And that was, you were literally running just a little bit more than their trend, and your renewal came in just a little bit more. And the reason why the billed rates and the effective rates are different is because there's this thing called a premium holiday where school care, the health trust, the interlocal trust, the 3 municipal trusts that do health insurance in the state, they're not allowed to build the giant reserve. Okay, just legally they can't. So at the end of the year, they have to give part of that balance back, all right? So you have what's called a billed rate and an effective rate, and the difference between those two rates is gonna be how much was given back from that pool. And last year, the amount returned was lower than the prior year, which made for a discrepancy between billed to billed rate versus billed to effective rate. When they don't return as much, then there's a bigger discrepancy between the billed and effective rate. That's why one was 6.5 and one was 7.5. Okay. Now, if we go to this year, all we know so far is that the school care trend is running between 7 and 8%. So it's higher, all right? So their whole pool, due to all the factors that we were talking about that at the beginning, is running hotter. So is the health trust pool, and so are almost every other group I work with's pools. I mean, it's the claims are really, really high right now. So school care is running between 7 and 8%, whereas last year it was 6.4. And we know that you are running above trend, right? You're at 104% loss ratio. So you're running higher than them, okay? So we don't have your renewal yet, but what I would say is if you look at their trend of 7 to 8%, it's gonna be a few points higher than that, right? You're running above their trend. I don't know what it is, but it'll be a few points higher than, or a little bit higher than the 7 to 8% is where it's gonna come in. And then interestingly and kind of tellingly about how the school care whole pool ran is that at the bottom, so your premium holiday this year is only going to be $89,516. Last year it was $654,000, all right? The school care whole entire pool premium holiday this year is only going to be 1.5 million, and last year it was 10.6 million, so it's a tenth of what it was. And the reason is because they also had a number of unexpected super duper high cost claimants. The whole pool did. So it's not like you're sitting here in this situation alone. Literally, all of the schools in the state experienced these high-cost claimants and collectively ate into that $10.6 million reserve. So it's literally they're
And
giving
was that
back.
reserve, I mean, the year before was 2021, right? So was that reserve artificially high for the prior year?
Nope, so if we go to this year, so here, look at the bottom, here they are over the years. And these were yours. So at the bottom, so you can see 395, 712, 725, 735, and then I don't know if every year I wrote school cares, but the prior year, yeah. So you can see there's your premium holidays over the course of time. And then 654 and now down to 89. You can see what an anomaly that is. It's kind of significant.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah,
it's an
kind of.
understatement.
And you can see, I put in bold here, you can see that's the yellow with choice that the majority of your people are on. So the build rates, so you can see, 1.2% increase, 0, 5.1, 4.2, and, and then this year, then 6.5, and then we don't know what this is, but see how it's there's kind of like this incremental kind of increase.
So if we're between 7 and 8% expected, and we're a little higher than expected,
So
I
school
think
care.
we're looking at 8%? Or
So
do you
school
think we're
care is
looking at
7 to
9%?
8, so I think you're gonna come in a few points within within, I don't know, 1 to 3 points above that range for the build. And then what's gonna happen is, let's just think about this for a second, the effective rate is gonna be higher because
Because we don't have a
because you're not
holiday.
applying any
Yeah.
rate relief towards it, any premium holiday. And the effective rate are what your employees,
Yeah.
feel, because that's what they pay, the effective rate. So, and I don't know what the effective rate's gonna be, but it's gonna be a few more points higher than the build rate.
When you say a few more points.
Well, I mean,
we're
okay,
talking-
so
We're talking
percentages, so let's.
fractions of
Well, no, like,
percent?
let's say, like,
Or-
okay, so if it's 7 to 8%, so I'm gonna make it up. School care's renewal at a build rate is 10%, okay? A
Okay.
couple points higher, like, if from 8, maybe it's 10. And then
Okay.
that's build, but then we have to get to effective and apply, the fact that last year you got 654,000 back, but then we're comparing an effective rate without getting that much back. So when you go apples to apples, all of a sudden that 10 might become 15. These are ballpark numbers. I don't have your renewal. I'm trying to give you a ballpark,
I understand.
area, but that
The
concept.
effective
of-
rate is not gonna go higher than the build rate.
It-
As a district, we will pay more because we pay the
Your
bill.
increase will be higher. It's not like
Right.
the
The
rate.
percentage will be.
Your percentage is higher.
That's all it is,
It's
but
the
overall, the
percentage
employee
from-
is still lower than what we pay
Yeah,
as a bill.
it's right. It's
Yeah.
lower than what you pay, but
Just so
relative
people
to
are clear with that.
last, yeah. So it's lower than what you pay by $89,000.
Yep.
But when you're doing like a percent increase from the
Right.
prior year, it ends up being a higher percent increase
Right.
than the build rate.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's a good clarification.
I think we ran a number, if we applied an 8% increase to the rates, it's an $820,000 increase to your budget, just as to see. I asked, that was this current year, I asked Alex, I said, just plug in 8% to this current year, what would it be? It's about 820,000 more. So we could be looking at $1 million add to the budget just for this, just for this.
All right.
Yeah, you'll know that by November 1.
Yeah, I just got my renewals for Primex. Before I came down here, I got the email that they've posted the package, so I'll be interested to see what workers' comp and property and liability looks like too. Yeah, all the little gains that we're gonna talk about tonight with the one-shot revenues.
So for the budget, Jack, you're plugging in a number of another $800,000 or $900,000?
No, we'll have what our numbers will be November 1.
I know, but we're voting on the budget on October 26th.
No, we're set for this year, 22,
Okay.
23,
We're
we're
talking about
good,
the
we know those.
All right,
We're getting next year's numbers
I'm sorry.
in a couple weeks. Okay?
You'll face that in January.
Okay.
Yep, so,
It's a long ways away.
Yeah.
Kirsti has been great to work with over my years on the board, and then being, on this side. And they really are instrumental in guiding us to where we've been today. If we were still on that HMO plan, what was that, 35,000 for a family plan? And we're at 28, 29 for a family where we were?
And
We'd be
I'll-
really off the rails if we had not made the changes we've made over these last, well, the initial years were 11 and 12 when we went from health trust
Right.
to
Yep.
self-funded health trust,
Then
to
to fully
premium-based
insured,
health trust,
yep, and
health
then
trust to
health
school
trust to
care.
school care. There's
then
definitely like
targeting this.
several $1 million saved by doing that. But then I also think like Jack's been very progressive as far as his thinking, forward thinking, right? So that
Maybe a
like,
little too progressive sometimes. They have
that's
to calm
all
me
right,
down.
but it puts school care in, like, you definitely lead the charge, which has been good. And I think it, as much as this is hard to hear, I always feel like you're benefiting from being in the school care pool. And I always feel like it's a very fair, almost way more fair than what I see in the open market. Like, relative to your claims, it's like, oh, that's a pretty good renewal relative to how you're running. So I do think that you benefit greatly from being in the pool. Unfortunately, everyone's pool this year, this isn't specific to you, it's just literally what we're seeing in the industry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Jack, did we get money back, unexpected money back for retirement, from the retirement?
Yep, I'm going to talk about that
Okay.
tonight. One-shot money, yep.
Several places.
On the understanding that a lot of the increase is driven by big medical needs in a few places, are there things we should be looking at, we should be pushing ProCare for? You talked about their transparency in prices. Do we know that people are actually choosing lower cost providers? Are they incentivized to do that?
So I think that's that's the best place to put education in a few things. One is wellness, so wellness, annual physicals, just having people take care of, general health needs early on, adherence to preventive medicines like for chronic care, diabetes and things like that. And then having people help understand how to use their plan through transparency tools. So I feel like, as far as what things would be good to educate everybody on, I think those are the areas to focus on as far as being able to do what you can to have some agency in creating a better.
Does the school care plan incentivize people for using lower cost options? There was a point, I don't know if they still do, the state had a website, and if you went to this standalone imaging center for your mammogram versus the hospital, the state saved this much money and you got $50.
That plan is through Health Trust, because I had it prior to coming here. And so you would, if you were gonna do a certain procedure, pretty standard procedures, you would go on the site and it would tell you what, you used that descriptor before, that one in Derry Medical charged
Right.
$750 and somebody else
Right.
charged $10,000.
Right.
You could see that, so Health Trust did that.
Yeah.
I
So-
didn't see that with health, with school care.
Yeah, I
school
think
care
there's
does
two
that.
different philosophies. So I think Health Trust is using a traditional plan and then incenting people to go different
Right,
places, and
right.
School Care is using a consumer-driven plan and trying to give people tools to choose where they want to go. So it's kind of two different approaches to try to get to the same.
And do we know which
Concept.
approach is
I
working?
don't know, so that's a good takeaway, and I can, when we get utilization reports, try to give Jack a report on either what tools are available or how people are using tools or, that type of thing.
Ms. Cannon, you had a question?
Well, no, I just commented because my husband is also on school care, and then they just moved over to Health Trust. It's interesting that the incentive only works once. So let's say you Concord Orthopedics wants you to do imaging at Concord Orthopedics. You can get the incentive to go to Basque in Bedford, which is about 25% of the cost. So you get like a $25 check because but if you have to have another one,
Oh, yeah.
they don't care. You don't incentivize the second one, which I think is kind of dumb.
I think that, right, there's different approaches, right? So Cigna, who's school cares provider, has a little bit of a different philosophy than, so there's, in the state, Anthem and Harvard both have plans that steer people to lower cost care, and Cigna has a different philosophy, which is they take more of this consumer-driven approach where they try to give people transparency tools, have people have a little bit more exposure to cost, and have people then make decisions themselves. Like, so it's kind of two different philosophies. But I hear what you're saying. It is the logical next question, which is, what can we do about this? Are we doing everything we can about this, right? Like, what tools are there, and are we maximizing them? So I feel like we'll get a report to Jackson.
Well,
yeah.
I think it'd be helpful too if people knew they could go somewhere else with Cigna
Right.
and save money, then
Yeah.
they could make that choice. But,
Right.
you know, there's the concern, am I out of network if I go somewhere else now?
You can get incentives from Cigna, because if you
Yeah.
follow through with regular checkups and do the things that you're supposed to, you get.
They deposit money into
Yeah,
your
you get an
account,
incentive
So-
check. I mean,
link
would
your
be great if
Fitbit,
they could-
they do
Right.
that
I
stuff
think
too.
Could add that to it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they do.
Yeah.
That's with Cigna. I got
Yeah,
that this year.
yeah.
And as we look at utilization, I guess, are there areas, as you're looking at it, that we could be investing a little money upfront? Thinking particularly if it's being driven in mental health, people need to see their individual providers, but if there are things that we can do within the buildings to help alleviate needs, I think that would be worth talking about too, if there's anything that makes sense.
Well, I
don't
think, in the buildings, you want to reduce, you want to have good, positive culture and climate, and reduce stresses and anxiety. I mean, that obviously plays a part in it, in the world of work, because that's what we are in, the world of work. So I think that's an important piece of the work that we do in the buildings.
One of
You're
the
right.
things they do is they bring in the flu shots, so you don't have to go outside to get those. You don't have to go to a medical facility to get those. It'd be great if they could do that with the boosters that come down the pike, or if people wanted them, or, anything else that's sort of preventative that we could bring to the schools rather than have people go to a facility.
Well, we are doing, as you know, we're having flu shots now at the buildings, and they're working on bringing in the new latest booster for COVID. So, we have done that.
That's great.
So, you're right, that's another way to help, the kinds of things you talked about.
This is all good feedback, though, and we'll take it all back to school care, and also get you. I feel valued we didn't have your claims today, but at least this was really more just to kind of give you the state of the state, so you could understand.
Maybe we can schedule another session
Do
to
follow-up.
talk about our.
Well, we
claims.
were hoping this would be helpful. This is you know what the first one is, salaries. Second, this one. And third's New Hampshire retirement on your budget, so.
Anyone
Well,
have
if we
any
didn't-
additional?
If we didn't have employees, we wouldn't have any of these problems.
I appreciate this, so it was informative.
Yeah.
Good.
Good.
It's good. Thanks.
Is there the pool for the higher claimants? Is there a reinsurance pool that we can, or do we?
No,
For that? Is that,
well, school care, so the way, they're their own self-insured pool, so they'll have high cost reinsurance. I'm not sure what the limit that they set it at is, much higher than your 150. So they're basically pooling all the schools together, and then depending on the size of the school, so yours is 150. If it was a teeny school, they might carve it out over, I don't know, 80,000 or something like that. It depends on the size,
Right.
which is kind of the same as if you were Harvard Pilgrim, right? You'd have a fully insured, and they'd pool things out over a certain level based on your size. So school care is running it almost like an insurance company, but then they would have at a very high level for say a big gene therapy shot claim, they'd be able to have protection against. I don't know what they set it at, whether they set it at $1 million. I haven't asked Lisa recently, but for you, they're just pooling it out of your claim so that it's not. And the reason that's a smoothing factor, right? Because if you didn't do that, one preemie baby, and then everybody'd have these huge, that's not fair, so it's meant to smooth things over time. And by, only having you responsible for, no more than $150,000 of a claim. And so, when they trend things forward, the way it works is you carve out all the claims that are over the 150,000 and then trend that amount forward, which is at whatever the Cigna trend is, which this year is like 8%, in order to try to, they're trying to peg where should you be next year. Yeah.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
I was just wondering if there's like a, kind of like a high-risk pool thing that we can,
So I feel like when this gene therapy and some of these really, really high prescription drugs come available, and I can tell you for my self-funded groups where each one is having to decide right now ahead of their renewal, do I want to cover gene therapy or not? And they have to say yes or no and put it in their plan, which is trying to make a decision on zero information about something that probably won't happen, but if it did would be incredibly significant. So it feels like that's going to be I don't know how our groups are going to absorb those costs. It just feels like they're just too big, and it feels like high risk pools might be a place that states could go. I don't know, but I think we'll start hearing more about high risk pools for some of those incredibly high one-off claims that just like could sink a plan. So these are the challenges, right, of trying to figure out how to absorb everything.
yeah.
But right now, I think you're in a very large pool in the state, and over time it's been immensely helpful. I think that Concord is definitely a marquee account, and so you get very fair renewals. But when you run at 104%, it's not going to be a flat renewal. So.
Well, thank you
Okay,
very
yeah,
much.
thank you. Yeah, you're welcome.
Thanks, Christine.
Feel free.
Be.
But I will say that without it, though, he'd probably not be with us. So,
Okay. Let's see if this works. I'm on slide 14, is where I'm starting from. And I get right into the thing. So, as we said, the FY23 budget, for where you currently sit now, should have had a slide to start this. Let me scroll down 2 slides. Okay, so this was the slide we provided that is where your budget is now. We will, based on what you do tonight, we will revise and give you a proposed and what the changes were from the current budget to the new budget. And as of right now, you'll have a proposed tax rate increase of 3.68% between the local and the state combined. All right. I will get, by the 26th, what's called the MS1 from the city, which will be the valuation. When I plug that in, that will adjust everything, and based on the budget that you passed, I will tell you this is what the tax rate will wind up being if you do nothing. Then I will, and everything was in a normal year, I will also show you, and I hint on it in here, if you do not have 7 votes on the 6th, the 26th, there will be 1.25 million that will go back to the taxpayers, and it will decrease the amount of revenue that you get coming in, and it's all one-shot money that you're getting. Which means you will need
Next
to make
year's
that
tax
up,
rate will
plus the million in
will be
health,
much
plus
better.
salaries.
Yeah.
It'll be easy 6-7%,
Close to-
easily. I will bet. So that's why it's important. So in what we are getting in this one-time money, we're gonna make we come up with some ideas on how to go about appropriating that money, because the key part of this is appropriating the expenses. And I'm gonna go through, let me start first with the revenue pieces of it. So this way you see what those numbers are. So you have additional state adequacy, okay? And that's just all the normal numbers, your free and reduced, your 3rd grade reading, your special ed. That amount is $232,130.24. The extraordinary needs grant is part of state adequacy. So we teased that out to have more discussion on it. It's in the adequacy number as it's presented, but it is a separate column like everything else. But now the state has created a new reporting piece in order to get that, that they want by January. Then we have a proposal in here to bring in some additional revenue from the Special Education Trust Fund based on items that we're seeing in special ed, and we'll explain that. We're looking at increased tuition in CRTC to help fund a new position. We have the one-time New Hampshire employer refund of New Hampshire retirement. That is the estimate that they've given us. There is about a $48,000, I think, discrepancy. So we are one of 59 employers that is not audited yet. Can you guess why? Not enough staffing to finish it. So it's not really materially different, but he gave me that and saying you're safe to go with it, but it could adjust.
Up or down, or either way?
Either way.
Okay.
They didn't note that to me. And then the other thing is a transfer into the health risk reserve to cover New Hampshire, to cover our early retirees. And I'll explain a little bit about that, but I have more information on that at the negotiations meeting on Wednesday. But if you wanted to go into non-public, I can explain that piece of it. Okay? So there are the revenue buckets that I look at. And again, if you get this money this year, it's one time, that some of this is one time.
Jack, can I just, this is money that we did not put in the budget before, that we've gotten in since we did the last budget, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep, this would be over and above the March 30th budget that you passed.
Okay.
And there's, some of it is because of the new revenue coming in, some of it is the way we're seeing trending coming out of all of this.
Okay.
So,
Of that money,
yeah,
860 something is transfers from our reserves. It's not really new revenue.
no.
It's
None of
Your
this will affect
propo-
the tax rate.
none of this will affect.
No,
the tax-
because you've already passed the budget. This is revenue that's either coming in one time or from your trust funds, and I'm creating expenses that match that number exactly. So it won't affect the tax rate.
if we agree
if
with
you-
what you propose.
Correct.
But what
Well-
I'm saying is, of the extra revenue, it's not 2.2 million, because
Some of it's.
some of it is taking money out of
Yeah,
our
it's-
reserve
Correct.
funds.
Correct.
Okay.
When I get to the $1.2 million number, which includes the adequacy and the one-time New Hampshire retirement, that's the one I'm
Okay,
worried about.
thank you.
The rest of it, not as big.
There's a couple of small ones, like, we didn't anticipate the tuition amount from, the CRTC. We have more students, and so we,
And there's some
adjustments are being made.
And there's some reorganization they're trying to do there, and I think we want
Yeah.
to try to support that, because that program is
Right,
really,
right.
it's doing
It's
fantastic,
awesome,
and
yeah.
I think we just want to feed it. So let me back up to the proposed changes that we looked at. First is the ARPN. So we had hired a nurse to oversee the nurses, as well as sign off on all the Medicaid. And that person has also helped in a lot of what Kathleen was talking about, organizing the flu shots and some of the other medical things that we're doing. Right now, we had funded that position in ESSER. And what we are proposing is to take it out and move it to the general fund. Okay?
Can I ask why?
Yeah.
Because ESSER
it was
funds are one time. Do we want to use that money for something else?
That's why I
Or-
want to take it out of ESSER, because I would think this is a position we would want to maintain, and it would allow us to build up, to have Medicaid pick this up.
So what are we gonna do with the 87,000?
It's just gonna sit in the
From
ESSER.
ESSER.
I will tell you, one of the things I'm concerned about is based on escalation and the broken ground HVAC project. I'm worried about not having enough money. That's what I'm worried about.
Okay, so we're
Because
trying
we've
to,
spent it on people.
so we're trying to move things out of ESSER so we can use ESSER for something else.
Something else, plus also not create as big of a cliff that you're gonna have to deal with in this 24 budget.
I'm just
Yep.
trying, like,
Yep.
the ESSER's free money. Why wouldn't we want to use it all?
Right.
Because the cliff is big, because we've had multiple years of salaries.
I'm just, yeah,
And that's why we're saying, if we can jump off that train now, we're looking at this position as, it's probably a critical position that we'd like to look at maintaining.
I'm just asking
Yeah.
why.
Absolutely.
Why
No,
move it
ask-
from
this
one
is-
bucket to another?
Please ask for why our rationale is what it is.
And you said Medicaid would pick this up. Do they pick up the full amount, or do they pick up
We
part
can
of it?
submit as part of that to get reimbursed for the Medicaid. Yes.
For the ARPN.
Yep.
Okay.
All right. So then you have the
So
director.
how much revenue would come in from Medicaid for that position?
I can't tell you right now. I can't.
What did we come in?
Twenty-
That whole
25%,
transparency and wellness.
50%?
What's his name?
What did we come in?
So last year, I think we brought in 700 some thousand, and I
Yeah.
budgeted 350.
Yeah. So
And this year, I think I budgeted a little bit lower number. I'm gonna see where we're trending right now.
So not necessarily, they won't reimburse for this position, it's more that this position will bring in revenue that will, okay.
Because they'll be able to classify. You have somebody that has the medical background to help make these determinations, and
Okay.
and somebody to challenge also on the other side, that this is what's being recommended. Well, what about this?
Well,
Haven't
the-
had that.
The new law says that we have to have somebody with a medical background in order to sign off on those IEPs. We were using a doctor in town and paying per IEP for him to review when he had time. It's hard,
Yep.
for him to do it. She's now able to do them as they come in.
And get more involved, because they're doing it part-time, and they're not gonna engage with the, so we think that would be helpful. The other one's Director of Student and Staff Wellness, that was also funded in ESSER. We believe that position will ultimately make it to the general fund, while you get this one-time money to build up, bring it out.
That's $144,000 a year?
Mm-hmm.
With benefits.
Yeah, it's everything.
Oh, that's with benefits,
We
okay.
budget everything, yep.
So, but much, is the ARPN not full-time?
It's prorated because of, based on the start date.
Okay.
I tried to prorate where I could, so I didn't, do July 1 all the way till now. The other one is the DEIJ, proposing that come out of, right now it's proposed to be funded out of ESSER, but move it to the general fund. So that part would eat into the 508,000. The first two eat into the additional adequacy. That one would go into the what do they call it? The grant component of it that I can't think of right now.
Now, just to, for the DEIJ, let me, originally we had asked for a part-time, do you remember that?
Yes.
And we put it in ESSA for 48,000 plus another 10 for pennies. So I had some money in that account. And so this represents us picking that cost up.
And it represents a full-time person?
And it represents a 200-day contract.
And not sharing with anyone
And
else?
we're not sharing.
So the next line is the transfer to the instructional trust, and I put that as a placeholder. As we talked about, that extraordinary needs grant wants something by January on how we plan to expend that. That's the balance after you take the DEIJ out, and I put that as a placeholder, so one, we can encumber it, and two, it gives you the opportunity to have input on what you want to do with it. Okay? Because I have to encumber it, and I need to place it to go somewhere, and I thought that might make sense because it's a board trust fund. And we can set the transfer there, and then you can decide. So now we're gonna get into the ones that are eaten into the special education trust fund, the student nursing services. These are positions that we had to fill based on IEPs and needs for nursing.
And
That
most of
total.
these tend to be nurses on a one-to-one, students with diabetics, especially type 1 diabetics, who, especially with the little ones, that we find that's where the greatest need is, in the elementary school, and having a nurse with them all the time. But there are other issues too with students with significant medical needs in the buildings. And unfortunately, when you're doing that work, when the budget's all done in March, and that a lot of the IEPs are written, some of transfer students, all of a sudden now you've got this deficit in terms of nursing services.
Is this hiring new people?
And this is hiring people to be able to pay those costs.
And how many
those-
people with this position, for that 107,000?
Well, remember, you have some money in the budget now.
Yeah.
This is in
Okay.
addition to.
In
Yeah,
addition.
that's an
Yeah.
addition.
So how many people are we talking about having on staff for
I
one-on-ones?
think there was 12.
12?
Was it?
It's at least 12.
It was
Yeah,
at least a
At
dozen.
least 12. It wouldn't shock me if it changes.
Yeah.
But we're gonna roll it, because
12 or
they do,
13.
they come and
Yeah.
go. And then that leads into the next line, which is the additional transportation needs. That's why I'm proposing that come out of the Special Education Trust Fund. So those two made up the 357,000 to come from the trust fund. And we budget for out-of-district placement, special ed costs, about 400,000. Last year, it was 739,000. And they're already telling me it's gonna trend pretty high. So I'm not gonna go right to my last year number. We'll do what we can to try to mitigate it, but I need to have some contingency. As with all these, I always try to make, it's a transfer from, but it's an up to. If we don't need it, I don't bring it in. But I'm definitely seeing things trending a lot earlier than later. And this is our opportunity to touch things. So the CRTC program coordinator, that's a marketing, business, and community outreach person. That is something Ann has talked to both Kathleen and I, and we believe that there's going to be an extra revenue based on, they're almost up to 750 kids there in CRTC. Myself and Ann were just on the phone with, did a conference call with one of the chancellors over at NHTI and the program director about expanding. They have, their campus is built for 5,000, then you have 2,800. And they're talking about some programs that we might be able to run over there.
So one of the problems that we have up there is, and we're going to get more detailed to the instructional committee, but one of the problems we have is the need to expand programs as things change, right? We have no place to put them at the high school. There's no more space there. So to be able to use not only sites in the community for kids to be able to do some of their actual work, but also at NHTI. So it's a combination of things. This position would help us to do that and work that through. So we have students out now in businesses, you know that, but we would need to develop that further.
And do you see those vans that are down a little bit further being used for
Yeah,
that?
Yeah.
They're gonna be like ants on a molehill, those things. And I'll explain when I get to that one too. So those two combined are that 357 amount that we had in the revenue piece as well, okay? I'm sorry, the 92 that I had in the revenue was the CRTC, but the up to above the 357 for nursing and transportation needs, that was coming from the trust. Now I'm getting into the section, the next 1, 2, 3, 4 is proposing the use of the one-time revenue coming in from New Hampshire retirement. The first one, which I noticed that the number's not in there and I will plug it in, is 36,875.
Yeah.
I've already purchased those.
So what was the plan to pay for them if we don't approve taking the money from the retirement money?
If I don't, then I will try to see what I get for the refund from Primex for the workers' comp. Because workers, and also the account for unemployment, we haven't really been using it.
Yeah.
Most of that stems off of the event at the high school.
How much were the AEDs, I'm sorry?
The whole thing is 36,875. 7,200 of that is a service agreement that if we want to continue, they will come in twice a year, make sure they work. The batteries need to be replaced, they replace them. If the pediatric pads need to be changed out, if the adult pads have to be changed out, if the unit gets changed, you call them, they're up here next day to service the unit.
The schools already have these, though.
They ranged from 2007 all the way to current. The one that they used at the high school had failed.
So we added 25 AEDs. We bought 25 AEDs. We put another AED in every single building in elementary, so they all have 2. We added, I think we put 7 at the high school, and then some at Runlet that only had 1. So we spread them all out in places that they didn't have them. So we worked with the school nurses. Our ARPN, by the way, helped us with that, and worked with the nurses as to designate the place. They're all, I think you saw it last week. Matt showed you a picture at the Capitol facilities, all boxed. A little, all inside. They have pediatric as well as adult pads, which you need. And it's self-directed. So we felt that was something that really, it was not an issue that, we had an incident up at the high school. People were running around looking for AEDs when a student needed them, and so we quickly had to take a look at it and upgrade.
And these units are in a box, they're clearly labeled. So
Yeah.
depending on the school, was the type of unit you had. Some were hanging from a hook, and they were in a package. Every one of these are in a box labeled. When you open it, it makes a piercing noise, so you know it's open. Doesn't notify and start calling people. All it is when you hear that noise, you know that box is open.
Yeah.
And it has the pediatric, the adult pads, all of which was not consistent, and the instructions, and a brand new unit.
So we're consistent now?
Everything,
Across
every
the-
unit is
every-
exactly the
every
same.
school.
They are already up and installed, and they are giving us, they are taking the old ones away.
I know you just said that they don't call anyone. Are they all near phones? Because I just imagine being a high school student and seeing somebody that might need me to use this device and then not, you know what I mean? Feeling in an emergency like I'd need to run towards it, but then maybe I wouldn't know what to do, so I'd want to call 911. So I was just,
Well, most people have cell phones.
Yeah,
You don't
it's
have
a-
a corded
person.
phone, I don't
And-
know.
and you don't have a
You know,
great
we don't have
signal in the
a
middle of the
phone in
building.
all- I mean, we have
Alright,
phones on classrooms and so forth, but, I mean, I think about the gym, and outside the gym, I don't believe there's a phone there. But certainly if you're in the gym.
We
there's
probably have them in the
somebody-
utility closets, but those are usually locked if you're, if
What's
it's
that?
the
Phones?
phones. But if it's an after-school thing or a weekend thing, you would not be able to get to it.
So the
you
logic,
use your-
when
You can
we-
use your cell phone.
Yeah.
when we
Somebody
came up
you
with
don't
these and
put
working
on.
with the RPN was to put them in common places, because we're also trying to think, everybody that goes in the school day to day will know where they are. But we have nighttime events, you have weekend events. I mean, the high school is constant. You have parks and rec that use our schools. The elementary school wouldn't even have one near the gym, which, I mean, I'm talking to the RPN, I'm thinking statistically, if something's gonna happen, that's where it's gonna be. It's not gonna be usually when the kids are there, it's gonna be probably something that's an after event, but they're there if they need them. And we put them outside, at the elementaries, they're all near the main office and near the gym, at each there. And then, we try to put them where large people would gather. So there's close to 8, I think there's 8 at the high school.
Yeah, good.
Just because you
We
have-
finally ended up doing that.
You have the CRTC side, you have the main office side, you have the gym side, you have the student service center, you have the auditorium. I'm trying to think
Cafeteria.
the other two.
Caf.
The cafeteria, you have the mini gym downstairs.
Mini gym, right?
But yeah, so we've tried to cover all the major areas where people would gather in a large place and know that that's where they're at. Okay. The next one is walkie-talkies. They're also pretty aged, from A to Z. Putting them in something consistent, we're working to get proposals for them now, but we figured out it was a good time, one use, to get these things started up. And
What's the lifespan on those?
A little bit longer in a school than in the police and fire. But, you know, they're all great until they don't work, similar to the AED situation. So putting some type of service agreement, somebody to monitor them, that understands them, and upgrade them is important. So that they range. The machines what we're looking at potentially moving to is moving off of the analog signal and moving to a digital signal, which has more coverage. There are spots and some, I don't want to get into too much stuff, but as far as blank spots and repeaters, all that is in that number. That's not just the talkies. Okay. This is doing a full evaluation and bringing all the life safety stuff up to at least a baseline. Okay. The next line is 10 passenger vans. So the only ones that we have that somebody, they need to go through a training, are the minivans. You may see the minivans that sit out White Farm, or you see them outside the high school and they say school bus on them. We're looking at 10 passenger vans that you might see more at the private schools that come out, where people can just jump in and drive them. That they won't say necessarily school bus on them. Because right now, we only have one actual school bus that somebody doesn't need a CDL. Every one of our buses need a CDL. And with the shortage of drivers that we have, and the various competing needs as it relates to athletics or sometimes special needs, having 2 of them available, we believe would help.
Is there liability? How are we gonna address who can drive those vans, and are they appropriately trained and monitored to drive?
Yep, we'll develop
You know, is
that.
any coach going to be able to sign out a van and take their team somewhere?
So right now, we do that training with them now for the little vans.
Okay.
Couldn't we offer to help access training for folks to get their CDLs as well?
I think a lot of companies are doing that right now and still struggling.
Yeah, they're not finding anybody.
Yeah, and having a gasoline vehicle for 10, it's just convenient. I mean, I know for me, when I've had to drive from my son's high school, they have a 14-passenger bus, not CDL required. I went on, filled out a thing that morning. By that afternoon, I was driving.
See, I don't like that though.
Well, that's what they had. But,
Like, that makes me
Yeah.
very nervous.
but we have different rules, and that's
Oh,
why they
yeah.
will run that through. But it's not, that can't happen. With a CDL, that can't happen.
No,
period.
but I mean, just,
But-
you know,
Yeah.
I think
You
there's a
don't
lot
want
of
every Tom, Dick, and Harry.
question, like, I think
Sure.
there's gotta be a lot of policy conversations around who can drive and how and whatnot. And who is it, so it's for sports and special needs students, is what you're?
Whatever those departments would need, at minimum. We figured 2 to
Bless you.
start, see
Bless
if it
you.
works.
Thank you.
It could be taking kids to NHTI for classes.
I was gonna
Right.
say, is that part of this CRTC
Yeah.
It can
Right.
be.
thing,
Right.
potentially?
And that, if it was, would there be revenue from CRCT to
To
cover
cover those
that?
costs.
Yes.
I didn't look at it like that. I will now.
Well, you might need more than 2.
Yeah, I mean,
start doing
they're,
And then where
yeah,
are we
it
gonna
went
park
out
them?
to jobs
That's
and
another
stuff,
story.
job sites for those kids that don't, drive.
And then the last one is the electric buses. So we've been batting that back and forth for the last several months. As you know, we applied in August for 3 buses. 3 buses, you get about $250,000 per bus. The cost of the buses are $325,000. So what we thought, and there'll probably be some other infrastructure things. So we thought the balance of that to go for the electric buses. Obviously, if we don't get awarded the grant, then that sits. But at least you've appropriated it, and then you can do whatever you want. If you want other ideas, we can come up with that, or you can come up with it, whatever you want to do. But that is all part of the one-time New Hampshire retirement money.
The 508,000, is that a one-time expense, or do we expect that will be an ongoing expense?
It's a one-time, and I'll go more into the details and negotiations for that.
I will tell you my concern about this plan is just that it is it's moving a lot of we'll spend $433,000 on new positions. Using one-time money. We will, if these special ed costs are ongoing, then we're up to $730,000 in one-time money. And we have a lot of expenses that you've been talking to us about for the coming year. I guess the question is, can some of this be moved to reserve funds where we can continue the conversation with the board
You
about,
can do all of it if you want. It doesn't.
and would we be able to move them out as the year comes in,
You
goes
just need
through?
7. You just need 7 votes.
Because, I think when we put the money in these positions for ESSER, it was with the understanding that there would be a process where we would continue the discussion and evaluate. So I'd like to know sort of more about the results of the RPN and the director of student wellness. We haven't even hired the DEIJ coordinator yet. So to move them from, to create 3 positions this late in the game seems like a lot to me, but I do want to keep the money for doing that. But I don't know if other people have thoughts.
Yeah, they could appropriate it towards the trust fund if they want. Either way, it's coming, whether it comes now or it comes in the next budget. These are all ESSER positions that are gonna have to be
Yeah,
dealt with.
I
So
think that they're gonna have to be
it's
moved to
up
the
to
general fund.
You guys, what do you wanna do?
I kind of think we're fooling ourselves. Move it to the general fund, because they're gonna be here, and they're gonna be here long-term, and ESSER's going away.
Jack, can we use the funds from the state money, not the retirement money, but the state money?
The
that they
adequacy
gave
money?
us, the adequacy money,
Yeah.
and the emergency, with the second account, which was, I forget the name of it, what did you call it? The second.
Extraordinary needs grant?
Extraordinary
Yeah, the two of them
needs, jeez.
combined are
All right,
740,000,
yeah.
232
I
and
thought we have to
508.
have a plan for that. We have
We
to
do,
by
by January,
We
and
have
that-
to tell them how we will use that money.
That's why I put 398,425, which is the balance of that 508, because I was funding the DEIJ at a 508 minus 110 gives you 398, and you can decide what you want to do.
All I'm saying is
Yeah.
I don't know if putting them in a reserve account will fulfill their,
We'll qualify.
what they expected when we would use that money. I didn't think that, but, I mean, why write a plan if you're
Right.
just gonna put it in a reserve?
Well, if I place in the reserve, as I said, I put it as a placeholder. I would do an up to, we wouldn't move the
Yeah,
money, and I'm
yeah.
assuming between
Yeah,
now
I
and
just wanna make
January,
sure we can do that.
whether it's instructional, finance, or you're all gonna have a discussion and figure it out, because we gotta submit a plan. So at least it was a placeholder, and I'm not taking it and encumbering for what?
So it's just
And I'm
it's
covering
just a
it for
placeholder until January when we tell them what we're
That's
using
I
it
figured.
for.
That's why I did what I did.
But then, sorry,
When a position moves to the general fund, does it automatically become a recurrent position? Or can it be taken out if we find that we don't need as many nurses as we have?
Right.
We
yeah.
could take that position
And
out
that, and that
later
part will
on.
be evaluated. One of the things that we didn't have that ARPN to do that evaluation. As she said, those IEPs are written last year, they're in there. Now she's part of that process. And what I'm hoping is we can get that down, hence using these one-time funds to get us through the year.
Good example of it,
is
she
what I'm
looked at
hoping.
students who needed nursing services, she evaluated it, she went in, and she clustered some kids with similar issues, so that the LPN or the, whatever the level of nursing staff that was needed, she clustered them. We were able to not have to hire somebody else
Right.
to cover those kids, so she did that evaluation for us. Now,
But-
I mean, it was just one position, it saved us some money, but and when you said, results of the position, that's what we'll bring to you.
so,
Yeah.
Because
What
we know there are
happened
other
when-
I
positions that
think
we
we
would
can
like
always
to see
move people
too.
out of the, I mean,
Yeah,
can
but
always
it just
adjust
sort
the
of
general fund.
becomes part of
yeah, routine.
the expected, yeah.
but I think the other piece too is what did we pay the doctor that we're not gonna be paying now?
Right. We paid him
Yeah.
per
What
IEP.
did- but what did we-
$85 an hour. It's not overly a lot of money.
Yeah.
But what the value we're getting is somebody that's medically
Right, but-
here.
But what I'm saying is then that line item is gone,
Right.
folded into this person's
right.
salary.
Yeah.
So it's
And-
not as bad as it looks.
One other thing we have to be careful of, we can't have a position in the general fund that we paid for and then turn around the next year and put it into a grant-funded position.
Right.
We cannot do that, and so we have to be careful with that.
And-
Put it in a Title I or, some other, Title IV or whatever.
Oh, so if you might have the so then it might be a good point then to wait, right? Because you might be able to apply these positions to other grants. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm saying you can't have them in operation and then say next year, you say, well, let's take it out of our regular budget and put it in a grant. You can't do that.
So I guess the question is, do we think that there will be grant opportunities?
For these positions.
I mean,
these
I don't
positions.
know what's gonna happen next year. I know what we had with ESSER, and obviously, Jack talked about the cliff, and we're gonna fall off the cliff, because we have positions in there that are gonna go, and it's,
Those first three are the most probably critical, if they plan on going forward or not. and that's really it. The rest of them, there's gonna be a lot of movement in there. It's special education. So they could be here, they might not. That I don't worry about because they're not funded by a grant now.
I just know that those 3 positions, to me, seem like they're addressing long-term problems. So when you talk about the cliff, I get anxiety about that. I want them to be funded by the general fund more from an emotional point of view, because I want the security of knowing they're here.
You know, at least the director for student and staff wellness we've talked about is becoming part of the operation of the budget. But to get it started, we use the ESSA funds. And same with the DEIJ. We originally had part of that in the grant money to cover half-time. And that was an important recommendation from our equity group and from various folks necessary. I grant you the ARPN is one that's a little bit different. But I think you always had at least the 2, student wellness and DEIJ, in mind for the grant for the regular operation budget at some point.
And it's not like we're not gonna use this ESSER money, right?
Well, Jack said it. We keep every time I talk to Matt, and he talks to train and who's
Right.
doing and bringing in all the equipment for broken ground. We're trying to monitor that. And listen, if we have money, we have another building that needs this. We have to go out to Beaver Meadows. So,
And the high school. High school's gonna be a big ticket.
Yeah,
item.
high school's going to be huge.
So.
And there's things that are still happening. We're waiting to hear for this round 2 of the safety grant, and what does that mean for? And none of them are up there. But to answer your question about grants and what's going to happen down the road, you probably have a better idea than I do.
I don't. Isn't there? There's not. Isn't there a grants manager, or is that?
Yes, we have a grants manager.
Yeah, and so she wouldn't have any insight into that.
Like today, for instance, she and I sat on the call with the Department of Ed. We do that every month. She has the same information I have, or Jack has. So.
Yeah, in our discussions with her going through this, she's exactly worried what we're talking about, the cliff, because there's a lot of positions in there.
Yeah.
And when you see all of them, you're gonna go,
About it.
yeah, it's millions. And we looked at the ones that we thought have a continuance, have revenue possibilities, and you heard about mental health tonight. And the DEIJ that you've been working on multiple months, so we targeted those 3 with this, saying, let's try to move to get them out of there. This way, we'll focus on the balance of it as it comes up for now.
And the only other thing I wanted you to think about tonight is there something else that you've had occasion to discuss, you heard from constituents in the community, things that may be lacking that aren't on that list? We kind of put together some things that we have now, things to prevent us falling off the cliff, things that we know needed upgraded. But, this was a discussion with you. I know we're presenting these recommendations, but are there other things that you might?
Well, we've talked about a communications person for a long time. But that's a big one.
And I think the question is, we know next year's budget is going to be challenging. We heard that earlier, and so, to the extent that we can think ahead to offsetting issues we may face next year, I think we want to think about that.
To have the
Well,
flexibility.
Flexibility
That's
to
why
do
we
that
look at these
too.
one-offs and try to take care of some things that might
Right.
mitigate that, including that last line.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is that what we just talked about?
I have not gone into detail on that. I will
Okay.
on Wednesday.
Okay.
What
And
is,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
what are we expecting for the retirement decrease next year, right? Retirement rates are actually gonna go down next year?
Yeah,
We looked at that.
yeah, I think it's, I have it in the slide. I wanna say 700,000, but I don't wanna go too high. I have it in the slide. Let me pull out what I said on the 12th.
My problem is that I just heard tonight, what we can expect on our health insurance, so you're gonna
It's not
have
gonna
to
be free.
face that, right?
Yes.
I forget what it was, Jack, when we went over it.
Oh, that was the one time, that
Yeah.
was the one shot money. Oh,
There it
estimated
is.
change, 820,000. That was just taking this year's salaries. Yeah, I should remember that, because I remember seeing the New Hampshire, the increase for health, and I'm going, this'll go down.
And
Health will
something,
go up.
we talked about that.
Yeah.
we were-
Can't get ahead.
So this will go down 800,000,
That-
we hope.
If we took what we pay this year and just changed the rates, so current salaries and everything, and changed the rates, we plugged it in, it'd be about 820.
Okay,
so
and
we
that'll
have benchmark.
completely get eaten up by the health insurance.
Yeah.
Okay.
So then you'll be starting at
Yeah.
some-
Hey, at least we have one to
Right.
offset the other,
Well, you're
Well, let's
right.
hope it's an offset.
or close.
Closer than we would be at.
I was gonna say closer than if we didn't have it,
Yeah, it's true. No, it helps.
so.
So, yeah, this was to bring ideas, try to find a way to use this one time, and if you want, if there's a couple items you wanna say, and you ask to put into a trust, we can put it into a trust and bring that back to you.
What are the costs of buses that are not electric
100,000 for a 77 passenger and 54,000 for 17 passenger.
versus 350,000 for one electric?
Well, if we get a grant, then we only have to pay 75,000.
Okay.
Other than that, we wouldn't be buying the buses.
And do we have a place to charge them?
Yeah, so we met with the city last week. They're gonna work with us that if in fact, because they're 6 to 8 months out anyway, before they would arrive. So we would put them up to conf and we would put conduit in, and they're willing to work with us to do that.
Okay.
So-
And if we don't get the grant, we wouldn't be purchasing
Well,
these?
No, and then we'd say, at least it's encumbered, that was the intent. We'd reprioritize and talk to you folks about where to go.
Okay.
But I thought it was a good initiative if in fact we're awarded the grant, because it is gonna be short. And then, we're not making it up, that's about what you're gonna need, maybe even a little bit more, but let's see if we have to worry about it.
Have we thought about panels to offset?
Solar
Panels to
panel.
offset the charge?
Solar panels. So,
Well, you get some back to the grid, that's not really set up yet in
No, no, to,
To add solar panels to our buildings?
no,
no,
for the
charging
buses,
stations.
at the charging stations.
No, they're gonna have to put in a separate transformer for that, in order to power them. Initially, what they believe is there's enough power to do it. Our discussion has been, we could probably go to 10 buses comfortably, ultimately, if they do another round, which I just had heard that there's another multi-billion dollars that's coming out for more, if we were to get this one. But it's ongoing, but not solar to power those, for the kind of juice they're gonna need.
Matt is working
Yep.
to come up with a plan on
Right.
increasing solar, using our roofs, things like that.
Yeah, the comp's not our building, so if there was something, we'd work jointly with them, but I'm sure now you have another entity involved. It's easier if we control it.
For the full board meeting next week, I think it would be helpful to have a little more data on the revenue on the ARPN and whether there would be revenue from CRTC to offset
I have that. yeah.
buses. And I don't know whether this program coordinator would be expected to do things that would increase revenue to the CRTC more than the position.
Well,
Does
I will
anyone
tell
have
you
any
this,
other
the
questions?
CRTC is the only program that covers itself plus.
Yeah. Does anyone else have any other questions?
No, but I do think we need to put the dollar figure in there for the AEDs.
Yeah, we will, yeah. Why that happened,
Yeah.
Jack? 36, you have that, Jack?
36,875, yeah.
Yeah.
I just,
Yeah.
because I was wondering why I was off when I was tying out,
There you go.
and that was why.
And I think to answer the question about what could go in the plan, I mean, if we're doing this, And these items, if the board approves them, could be considered part of the extraordinary needs grant, and then we book other money in a reserve fund, you know. I mean, money is fun, you know, we book the retirement system money in the place instructional for the placeholder.
I see what you're saying.
You,
Yeah, yeah.
if that counts for the plan, or if we,
Well, that's a question I'll ask.
Yeah.
I'll ask that question, whether we can do that.
Yeah.
If we can do that, then, you know, that's a possibility. We'll put it in trust and hold until you are ready to make those switches.
or,
I'll put the whole 508
Yeah.
into the trust.
no, what I'm saying is, if we don't think we can put the 398 of the extraordinary needs grant into the trust, this is more a mechanical thing, then we could spend it on the other things and put the same amount of money
with using the
Back
retirement.
in the
Yeah,
trust.
she
Just, I'm just saying use
I figure
which,
they know you have to plan
which
by
po-
January,
just
but you gotta
which
encumber
pocket.
it.
Good, I feel like I
So
don't have to
where do I
understand
encumber
this.
it? I'm thinking it's not a problem, and I'm not gonna move it. It's just like the other trusts.
Yeah.
But I guess the question is,
Yeah.
then that requires us to spend another $400,000 by January, and I don't know that the board is gonna wanna do that. So, so that's what I'm saying, is if we,
But that
you
would be,
switched
you're saying the 400,000 would be an allocated grant?
so we have this extraordinary needs grant from the state that we need to spend,
Yeah,
and then they're proposing spending it on the 3 positions and then putting nearly 398,000 in the instructional trust. But at the same time, we're being told that we need a plan to spend that
Yeah.
$398,000.
and that's what Kathleen was saying, so
by-
we can't say
by
we're gonna-
January. So we
right,
can't, so it wouldn't stay in the trust necessarily,
because we're gonna be utilizing
I
it for
want
the
it-
because
purpose
we'll
we
need
asked
to
for.
use it.
I won't even move it. I'm just gonna encumber it and say, this is the intent,
But,
but you'll take action. and then
but
you-
we would be required to spend it,
Yeah,
is what I'm saying. And we wouldn't be able to keep it in the trust.
Right.
forever.
we have to
To
utilize
use in
it.
next year's budget.
Right.
So why not use that
saying.
money
Sure.
for the walkie-talkies, the vans, the
I'm not
buses?
sure you can use it, because if
You
it's in the
can't.
trust, then it shows that you're not spending it. And-
Well, that's why I'm saying
Yeah.
we
Use it
we
to
shouldn't
buy
put it in
those
the
things.
trust.
Maybe we use
Right.
it and put some other money in the trust.
That's
Right.
what I'm
That's
saying.
what, yeah, you're saying,
You're
use the
saying to
retirement money to
left
put
pocket
that in
right
and
now.
Pay
switch
for
off.
some of those
Yeah,
other
no,
things, and
Yeah,
then,
okay.
But
So-
then do we need another 7-person vote again? I mean, because the issue is whether we can get 7 people together multiple
Well,
times.
you
to-
put money in
do you
the
know what I mean?
trust, you always gonna need 7 people to make that decision. You
But-
have to have
Okay,
that
that's-
hearing and make that vote.
So that doesn't change anything?
No,
But he's
it doesn't.
proposing putting the money in the trust anyway. It's just a question of then we might actually be required to take it out of the trust.
No, I
and
understand what you're
spend
saying.
it.
I'm just concerned about trying to pull together a quorum or
You
7.
guys do pretty well with that. I mean, you have a pretty good attendance,
No, I will tell you,
very good
at least
attendance, actually.
since I've been here and it hasn't been an issue. If it's all encumbered and the total bottom line appropriation doesn't change, I've usually done simple majority. Because I'm not increasing appropriations. We're just altering what,
Yeah, that's
you're
probably
just
true.
changing how you're spending it,
Yeah,
probably
no,
true.
not increasing appropriations.
But
Because your
what
charter
happens
is
with-
clear to increase the
But
appropriation.
you're not planning on, but you're not but putting it in the trust, you're not encumbering that 398, are you?
I am. I'm just encumbering it and holding it. When I do notice when I do your language, I always say an amount transferred to the trust up to. We don't do those till June. I don't bother transferring the money because they don't.
So I guess, but
It's
if
just
the,
a placeholder,
if the state is gonna
literally.
require it to be
Yeah,
spent this
that's the only thing I'm gonna
this
check
school
on.
year, then I
I'm
think we
gonna
need
check
to
on
know
that.
that.
Yep.
And
I
One
agree.
other just minor thing,
Yeah.
looking at this, I mean, it might be helpful, we've identified, we got 2 buses and 3 buses, or 2 vans, 3 buses. How many walkie-talkies are we talking about? How many AEDs are we talking
Yeah.
about? Just put a number up
Yeah,
there.
but we-
Yeah,
Clear
I
up
can,
the
yeah,
numbers,
I
yeah.
can do that. Yeah.
anyone have any other thoughts, questions?
And in addition to the communication position, if there's something else that you think we really, we need to kind of focus on this, we didn't anticipate this money coming in. I mean, if I know
No,
that.
but I'm not sure we would have, I mean, I'm not sure the board was looking to you know, these become increased expenses in the next budget if this is
Well,
one-time money. And some of it we want to do, but
Yeah.
some of it,
Yeah,
yes.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
So again, I'm not on this committee, so tell me to be quiet when you've had enough of me, but
Never.
do we have any data on whether the math tutors and the tutors that we've done through the ESSER, are they effective? Is it worth trying to look at whether we spend some of this one-time fund to extend them out another year?
I will have that for you. We have our first data meeting coming up next week for every building. I want to see the data.
Yeah, I'm just,
I just got, we just got the state assessment scores as Concord related to the state scores, so we're putting that together for you to show you. So,
Gina, didn't you say you didn't need a microphone tonight?
But I think the point that she is making is if we're going to start moving positions from ESSER to general fund, we may want to look at it more comprehensively as a board and make all the decisions where we might think the director of wellness is really important, but maybe we think
yeah.
math tutors are more important. We don't know.
We don't
And
know
that's
without
what
the data.
my concern
And,
is
you know,
too.
you have 17, remember, you have 17 ed associates all in those primary grades.
Yes.
Remember, we put them in K and 1 to give the teachers an extra hand for those little guys when they came in. So they're there too. This is their second year.
I think you
Yeah.
have special ed teachers also
We got
in
some special
every
ed
level.
teachers.
Yeah, we've
We
got to
gotta
make sure that that's,
You guys,
we're getting good bang for the
we
buck.
went
on
over
that.
every single position. We have a sheet that Ellen and Jack and I sat and went over every single position. John and Kim also, and went over every
Because
position.
we
So-
developed the 24 budget, we wanted to go through the grant and say, what were all the one times that were due to
Yeah,
expire?
what do we need?
Dump
What
them
do we
out,
need to stay?
make the list, and then, okay, here's what the general fund would have to absorb, or you're gonna come back and say, we wanted to fund it for us for a second year or a third year. Okay, this is what's available.
I have a quick question. Are we supposed to vote on a potential motion in here?
I put a motion in there if you want to, or if you got something else, you can create something else. I just did it to try to give some direction to the board in general.
Next week,
But-
I have, next week, I think we have an executive committee meeting, on the 24th, right? I know it is the 24th, I don't even have to look, yeah. So I usually do develop the agenda, just so you know. Do you want this on the agenda? Do you
Well, we have to do this on the 26th.
Oh, right, we're gonna do it on the 26th.
So,
Yeah, I'm not sure, yeah. If not, it all lapses.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
You're right. You're
So I
right.
had created two motions.
I was
One
thinking
was,
we would do it too at the November meeting, but no, we'll do it at the 26th, okay. I know that too.
yeah, the first one is if you agreed with what we did to appropriate as it sits, and you can always adjust it, whatever. That's this one. The next one in red just highlights to me what fields I need to change. If the numbers are different, you don't want, whatever. So, your choice.
So if this original motion, not in red, would be moving those 3 positions to the general fund? Would be a recommendation
So
to
the board
it
does
for
its
it.
thing, yeah.
Right.
But for discussion, that motion would be what the motion would be.
Well, I'm willing to move the first motion. I'm okay with moving them to the general.
is there a second?
I'll second.
For discussion, I guess I would like some questions answered. I would like to understand the grant, the extraordinary needs grant requirements before
Yeah, I do.
I vote on where we're moving, what money we're moving where, and various.
Just knowing that if we
Things.
have the ability to move it into one of the trust funds
Yep.
and hold it in abeyance there. Okay, I will get onto that tomorrow. All right.
Anybody else want to speak on the motion? All right. Then I will call the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Nay.
I just don't know enough about it right now myself.
So motion fails, 2-2. But we
So
will,
we're not gonna make any recommendation to the board?
It's fine with me. They'll just hash it out that night.
You can say that, I mean, that's happened
I mean, it's
before.
happened before. It
Yeah.
happened last year.
Yeah, it happens when you don't have a decision to.
And I just, I mean,
Oh,
feel like I want.
so let me just go
information.
back so I'm clear. Remember, if we don't have 7 votes, because if this is any trend, what would happen in order for the board to make adjustment for the 23 budget? Remember, you need to have 7 votes in the affirmative, because we're past your initial voting period. If the board does not have 7 votes in the affirmative, it will result in a decrease of $1,254,606.56. It results in a decrease in the tax rate of about 27 cents per thousand, which takes the rate from 1314 to 1287. For a home assessed at 250, because that's what we've used standard, we'll change that for the upcoming. Right now, that budget is a $63 increase. The one, if it would stay at the budget you have, less that revenue. If you let it all go back, it's going to result in a $5 decrease.
But then we would have a big one the following year.
Oh, yeah.
A big increase.
Without a doubt.
And to be clear,
Right.
I think my question is whether we put some of that money, more of that money in reserve to offset next year versus spending everything, and how we spend it, if we, where.
I just
what
want to make sure we're on
buckets
the
it
right
comes
path of,
Yeah.
with this one-time money.
Exactly.
That's all my
Yeah,
intent is
I
there.
think
I'm not
those are
looking to
important
firm up
positions.
where
I
it
have no
goes, because
problem
that's
with any of
as a
those.
board,
Just,
but
are we doing it the,
Yeah, I'll
We're-
find out. I don't,
Right.
I wish I had an answer to it, and I
Yeah.
don't, so I will find out, though.
yeah, should we pay for,
Yeah.
okay.
Anything else, Superintendent?
No, that's it.
For those who are not on the negotiations committee, would you like to go into a non-public session to get a quick update on what the health negotiations line item is?
I'm on the negotiations.
I'm not on it, I'd like to know.
Okay.
Yeah.
So can I have a motion to go into a non-public?
I move that we go into non-public for, is it RSA
You got 91.
91A?
3, colon 2,
I guess I could say C, managers
C.
discussed in
Sure.
public.
See,
Okay.
Does that work?
Second.
All those in favor?
aye.
Aye.
Okay, we're gonna go into a non-public session. I think we
We'll
will
just go
just
over
be
the other.
coming back to close out the meeting unless you have anything else. So we will not be coming back
Motions
on the air.
again, I'm sorry, it was
Brenda,
in.
I
Kate,
seconded.
Kate.
are we going into the
Yeah.
alarm?